Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's learning webinar. My name is Chantal, and I'm going to be your host today as we look at scale. We're going to look at how we determine scale in both model space and when we get to the worksheet space, and how we can have different scales of different drawings on a single drawing sheet, and how we can change all of those. Following the class, I'm going to open up the chat panel so you can ask your individual questions that you might have on scale. And then following the entire presentation, I'm going to email you out a booklet so you can read about everything that we've covered today. And in there will be a link so that you can watch the video again. So if you want to watch something that we did during the class over again, just to really understand it, that'll be all in the email that I send you afterwards. So let's get started. So when we're building a model in Envisioneer, we're always in a scaled environment. Meaning as it's on my screen, it's not one-to-one, though it could be. We're putting it into a particular scale. So if you go to the View pull-down menu, you'll see at the very bottom, there's a View Manager. So View Manager. It's in this View Manager that we bring up the different views that we have. So standard being our model space and all the various sheets that you've created along the bottom end are all listed here. And each one of these has properties that we view on the right-hand side. So when I look at my standard, my model space, it's at 1/4 inch equals a foot, 1 to 48. If I go to my various sheets, I'll be able to see their scale as well. What I always do, just to make it easy to go from model space into my different sheets, is to keep the scale the same. The scale of the overall environment in the sheets, as we'll go over when we get there, doesn't matter. It's more importantly of what you're inserting onto that sheet that does. So right now, you'll see that all of my sheets and my model space are all at 1/4 inch equals a foot. They're all at the same scale. Well, we're going to go to the sheets, insert some views, and when we insert those views, we can change up the scale. I've chosen 1/4 inch equals a foot because I normally draw at that scale for my floor plans. But if you find that all of your projects, you have to have a smaller scale because you're working on a smaller piece of paper, you can always change the scale here. So if you know that when you go out to work in drawing space, ultimately all the views that you're going to be inserting are going to be at 1/8 inch or 3/16, you can set your model to that scale and your sheets to that scale right here in this View Manager dialog box. So when you're going from one to the next, they're always going to be at that scale. I keep mine at 1/4 inch because I'm predominantly using that scale, but I do insert different elements onto those sheets at different scales. So let's go look at how we can do that. So I'm just going to close out of here. So my model is drawn at 1/4 inch equals a foot. Now I'm going to insert views of this model onto my working drawing sheets, and I want to change the scale. So I'm going to click on Sheet 1. As we looked in that View Manager dialog box, this environment is again 1/4 inch equals a foot. So this is a 24 by 36 inch piece of paper, and it's drawn to that scale. So when I go to insert views into here, we're bringing them into 1/4 inch equals a foot environment. So I'm going to go up to Define a Smart View to bring in a view of my model, and we will show different views at that time. So I'm going to hit Define Smart View. Part of this Define Smart View dialog box, when you're bringing in a view, is the scale here on the right-hand side. We know we're bringing it into 1/4 inch equals a foot, but what scale do we want this particular drawing to be? It doesn't have to be 1/4 inch equals a foot. It can be any scale, and it will scale it and put it onto the sheet correctly for you. So if I want my ground floor plan to come in at 1/4 inch, and then we'll insert different views around it at a different scale, we can do that. I'm just going to turn on and off the visibility of different elements here. Nothing on my terrain, so we can fit this all on the sheet, and turn off those elevation marks and click OK. So now we've got that smaller view here. Something else that I want to mention about scale it doesn't scale the drawing if I zoom in or zoom out. So if I zoom in here, that's not altering the scale before I put it in. It's just zooming in. What you see in this preview is exactly what's going to be inserted, but it's going to be inserted at the scale listed over here on the left-hand side. If I zoom in and only show this portion of the model, and it looks larger on my screen, it's still going to go in at 1/4 inch equals a foot. It's just going to insert what's visible here in this preview, just that single portion of my model, but it's going to bring it in at that scale. So zooming in and out does not scale your model. The scale properties over here on the left-hand side is what ultimately is going to scale that view. So I've got my ground floor plan at 1/4 inch equals a foot. I hit insert and I place it here on my model, right on my working drawing sheet. So if I come in here right now and zoom in, if I take a measurement, tools and dimensions, or even just to measure here, and measure from this extension line down to this, I'm just going to turn my ortho back on, down to this one. If you look at the bottom of my screen, it's 7'1" 3/4 inch, because the drawing that I brought in is at 1/4 inch equals a foot, and the entire drawing environment that I'm in is 1/4 inch equals a foot. So both of them are going to match up. Now watch, I'm going to come back up here, define a smart view. I'm going to still do the ground floor plan, but I'm going to turn off again a lot of different things here. So my elevation marks and anything on the terrain, turn those off. And I'm going to turn off display nothing but the roof surface. That's the only thing that's going to come on. So I've got the dimensions, so we can still look at those dimensions, and I've got the roof plan on. But I'm going to bring this all in at 1/16 equals a foot, so much, much smaller. And then I hit insert. A copy will attach to my cursor, and I'm just going to throw it down here at the bottom. Now, the one thing that you should always note is that the dimensions, the size of our text is always going to be the same size. So when I zoom in here, see how the dimensions from my floor plan above, the text on my roof plan are the same size. Because when you're drawing a set of plans, you wouldn't scale down the size of your text to make it unreadable if you're bringing in a smaller detail. To think of the days of hand drafting when you're drawing everything out by hand, you didn't change how you wrote anything, you wrote it all at the same size. So text size always stays consistent, but the model itself, you can see, has shrunk. I'm going to do that same test. I'm going to zoom in on a dimension here. Now these dimensions got a little bit overlapping because its size went big there. But from this point here to this point here should be 17 feet 10 1/4 inch. If I go back up to tools and I hit measure, and I click from here and bring my cursor over to this point, you can see it's only 4'5". Because we went from 1/4 inch all the way back to 1/8 inch, we're really dividing everything by 4. So those dimensions aren't going to measure the same because they're not. I'm in a 1/4 inch equals a foot environment, but this is 1/8 inch drawing. So it's being represented by 1/4 of the size because it's going down to that 1/8 inch. So you're not going to find the same as when we dimensioned here. It's going to be the same. This is smaller. So it's not going to, those dimensions are going to be at that 1/8 inch scale. Okay, I'm going to open up another sheet to illustrate again some different dimensions. So I'm going to come back up here to define a smart view. And I'm going to go to an elevation view. And in my elevation view, I'm going to change that to be 1/8 inch equals a foot here. And we're going to zoom that out a little bit so we can see the elevation there. And I'm going to add in these datum lines. Yes, I want to include a datum line, so they're going to give my measurements on the side. Give me my ground floor level, yes. And give me the ceiling height on the location, yes. only give it to me though on the ground floor. The other locations, there isn't a second floor, so I keep that to no, and I don't want to record it to the foundation because I haven't shown that. So I'm giving dimensions out to the side of my elevation, and I'm giving those certain sizes. Here, if I click on settings, this is where it goes and looks at the settings of how you're going to dimension those datum lines. So how far off they are, the dimension size, the size of the block and everything like that that you're using. Okay, and then all I have to do is hit insert, and a copy of that elevation is coming in, and my text size there is huge. So I'm going to go up to my settings and my document settings and go to my unit to measure my element marks there, my datum lines. Let me just edit, undo that, and do that right from the start where we were. So I'm going to define that again, go to my elevation view, yes, but in my settings here, this is where I'm going to want to say the layer. Well, let's put this on just a general text layer. We'll put that on the same as our title block. Just to be quick here, position both, datum block. We can do, I want to include one. This is my text size and everything here, my line types for my leader lines. The text, I'm going to say instead of a default style, we're going to give it the same as dimensions. Okay, so default there was making it very huge, and I'm going to center that through. So I'll hit apply and OK there. And hopefully that takes, because I've already inserted it once as the default. And let's insert that. And there are our lines, and you can see our datum line text. I brought that in as a 1/4 inch for this one. My next one, I'm going to bring it in smaller. So I'm going to again define that smart view. And I'm going to go to my elevation view, and I'm going to say the rear elevation here. And when I'm doing the rear elevation, I'm only going to zoom in on one portion of it. I only want to see this portion. So we're going to pretend like this is a remodel. So I'm going to scoot everything out of the way, and I'm going to bring it in large. So I'm going to bring this in as a 1/2 inch equals a foot, almost like a detail. And then I hit insert. And only that portion will insert, and it's there on my drawing screen. And I'm just going to move that down. So there's that drawing, datum lines brought in bigger. So everything can be brought in, different size, different scale. If we're going to be adding in additional dimensions, what I have to remember is this one here is twice as big. So if I add in a dimension, tools, dimension, linear dimension, and I'm just going to zoom in on the window as an example. And I want to show a dimension from one side of the window to the other side and put it up here. See how I put that as 8 feet? We know that's not 8 feet. We know that that's only a 4-foot window. So I'm going to click on that dimension. And see how I've got the properties of it over here on the side? When I'm looking at those properties, you'll see scale, value scale, and override. So because this is scaling it like it is a 1/4 inch equals a foot, we have to tell it, no, it's actually half that size because I brought it in at a 1/2 inch equals a foot. So we've got scale value there. I can put in as 0.5, and it will scale everything, the size, everything down by 0.5. I'm going to bring that back up to 1. And then we have value scale. So value scale means keep the size of the text the same, but let's scale down that dimension by 0.5 and hitting enter. And then it'll give you that dimension. So you can take advantage of the value scale, knowing you're bringing in something twice as big, but you need your dimensions to be half the size. You can do the value scale. We also have override. So if you wanted just to say that this is 48 inches by, let's say 36 inches, just to give a window size, I can override that entirely, that dimension, just to show that size. Okay, so if you're going to be doing dimensions out here, be conscious of the fact that you're in a scaled environment, and if you bring in something on an alternative scale, like bringing it in at that 1/2 inch here, take advantage of that value scale and say, I brought it in at a 1/2 inch, it's going to be twice as big. I have to value scale that down by 0.5. Okay, let's go over that again. So I'm going to go to another sheet just to reinforce everything. I'm going to go back up and define a smart view. I'm going to keep it on my ground floor plan, and I'm just going to zoom in on just the ensuite here. Just want to have that ensuite, and I'm going to hide a whole bunch of things here, my viewing aids, my dimensions and text, elements on the terrain, and if I have floors showing, ceilings showing, and the roof, let's just hide all of those. So it's a very simple view. We're just highlighting on this ensuite. That's really what we want to profile for this drawing. I'm going to bring it in at a 1/2 inch equals a foot. So I'm bringing it in as twice as big as my 1/4 inch environment. And I hit insert. And a copy of it will be brought in. Now, when I want to do any dimensioning with this, if I left the dimensioning off, but I wanted to just show a simple dimension, maybe from this corner over, I have to remember that I'm in this scaled environment. So I'm going to go up to Tools, Dimensions, Linear Dimension. I'm going to pick on that corner, and I'm going to click that I'm perpendicular to this wall. And then I show it where I want that dimension to sit. So it's going to sit right where I have it there. And it's in there. Let me zoom in on that. So right now it's saying that's 16 feet 1. Well, we know it's not 16 feet. We know it's 1/2 of that. So I would come over to my value scale and type in 0.5. And then that'll bring it down to 1/2 of that. So it'll show that dimension only in that scaled environment. Okay, I'm going to zoom back out, bring in some more drawings to illustrate it again. Define a smart view. I'm going to go at my ground floor again, keeping it at a 1/4 inch, zooming in on the front here with the dimensions. I want them to show, and I'm just going to zoom these over here. So I've just got this one portion right here. I'm just going to maybe just the garage and its dimensions is all I want. Just zooming out a little bit there. So just focusing in on the garage, bringing that in at a 1/4 inch equals a foot, hitting insert. There's that. I'm going to do that exact same thing again. Define a smart view. Ground floor, bringing this in at an 1/8 inch equals a foot, the exact same area. Okay, so we're just bringing just that portion in, just our garage on the screen. And let me just zoom in tight there. Perfect. So we've got, here's our, again, scaled environment showing just that. Hitting insert at an 1/8 inch. And I'm going to bring it close because I want to show and illustrate. These are the same type of two views, one smaller than the other, but look at the text size. It's consistent. It's got that same height. So even though you're bringing in a drawing at an alternative scale, we always keep that text nice and consistent for you. And if I was going to add in another dimension, I have to remember that this one down here is a scaled environment. So I'll have to times it up by 2, where this one would be perfect because it is the exact 1/4 inch equals a foot. So let me recap everything that we talked about today. So starting at the top, I'm going to go to View and View Manager. This is where we manage both your model view and your sheets. And any view that you're in Envisioneer, it's always a scaled environment. When you click on the view, it'll show you its scale over here to the right-hand side. So my model view, I was always drawing at a 1/4 inch equals a foot. You can have that at any scale that you want. So if you prefer to even draw 1:1, you can set this up to be 1:1. 12 inches equals 1 foot. So when you're working in the model, it's a real world environment of 1:1. But when you bring it into your sheets, you can set these up as scaled environments. So the title block, everything is at scaled down to 1/4 inch equals a foot. So when you go to print it, you're going to be printing it at those scales as well. Even though I have these at scaled environments, that doesn't stop me from bringing in views of any scale that I want. So we brought in this view and we brought it in at 1/2 inch equals a foot. This one is 1/4 inch equals a foot, and this one's 1/8 inch equals a foot. Regardless of the view I bring in, the text is going to remain consistent. But if I add any additional dimensions, the dimensions are always going to read the distance as the environment you're in. So since this sheet has been set at 1/4 inch equals a foot, when I pick 2 points, it's assuming 1/4 inch. So if you're dimensioning this view, that's 1/8 inch, you're going to have to times your value scale up times 2. Or if you're scaling in this view, which was much larger, you're going to have to scale it down by 0.5. So it knows it's not that large. When I go to print, File, Print, this entire environment that I was drawing in on this drawing sheet is 1/4 inch equals a foot. So when I come up here to File and find my PDF writer here, and I'm going to go to an Arch D piece of paper because that's the size of paper that I'm drawing to, and Arch D is the default. So if you still have the CADSoft title blocks and you're using those, they're an Arch D piece of paper, and their orientation is landscape. When I go to print, couple things to keep in mind. First of all, when you go to print, all extent is the entire area of your working drawing sheet. I always set it to window. So when I'm windowing around it, I click on this window button and I go from this outside edge, this red little dot up here, down to this red edge down here. That's the actual 24 by 36 inch piece of paper. Those two markers mark a 24 by 36. The lines around it are just title block lines to give it a nice profile around it and to give that title block edge. But the actual paper goes out to the extent of those red dots. So I want to make sure that I'm just printing to those. And it'll show me my little preview that it's 2 feet by 3 feet, 24 by 36. Perfect. Down here, when I go to print, I want to make sure that I print it to scale. I'm printing that entire sheet out to scale. 1/4 inch equals a foot. You can see the scale down below. So it's going to print it to that scale. Now, I have different views here at different scales, and they still will scale correctly. So if I put up my scale rule up against this blown up detail that was 1/2 inch equals a foot, it will read correctly. This one with a scale rule at 1/4 inch will read correctly. And this one down here, because it's brought in at that scale, will read correctly at the 1/8 inch scale. It's just the drawing sheet itself was brought in at 1/4 inch, and that's what I'm printing to. If I only wanted to print a certain area of my drawing, I could change this print window to be right here. I'm just printing this one area. I want it centered on my page, and I'm going to print to scale, but I want to print this one, and I believe I brought that up to 1/2 inch equals a foot. And you can see it's my 2 by 3 piece of paper, and it's printing that out to scale at 1/2 inch equals a foot. So you can print those different views out as well. Now, if I wanted to print this on an 11 by 17 piece of paper, let me bring this back, see if I've got one on this printer here, 11 by 17. And I'm printing it to scale at 1/4 inch equals a foot. And my window is going to go back from here to here. So see these lines that appear? It knows that at 1/4 inch equals a foot, I couldn't possibly print that entire drawing sheet out on an 11 by 17. It fits on a 24 by 36. It does not fit on an 11 by 17. So to print it out to an 11 by 17 piece of paper, you would need to have these 9 sheets, and you could tape them together, glue them together, whatever. If you wanted that entire sheet printed out, to be a 1/4 inch equals a foot, in 11 by 17 pieces of paper, it would take 9 of them to bring it into that 24 by 36, which makes sense. If I only wanted to do a portion of that, again, that's when I can do my window and just window around a portion of it, just that portion, and it will print it out to scale, because this portion will print out to scale for you. So always remember, when you go to print, you either have to change the size of the paper or your scale to be able to print it out. If you wanted to print out something that doesn't fit on an 11 by 17, change the scale or change the paper size or your print area. So I'll take this back down to my Arch D, and we could see my Arch D in the preview there of what it's printing out at a 1/4 inch equals a foot. Lots of information we covered today. I want to make sure that it's clear in everyone's mind. Again, the book that I'm sending out after the class does cover all of this as well. It shows you standard print sizes and understanding the view manager and the associated scaled environments that you're working in. What I'd like to do now is open up that chat panel and answer any individual questions that you might think of when I was going through the whole presentation. In that GoToMeeting console on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a questions area where you can type in questions and I'll be able to see them and read them out. I always say never hesitate to ask a question, because if you're thinking everybody else that's watching the presentation today is going to have that same question. So post it up. No one sees it but me. I'm the only one that can read out those questions. So never hesitate, never be embarrassed to ask a question. You can't learn if you don't ask a question, if you don't know something and how it works. So make sure you always take advantage of this time to ask questions as well. So I'm going to go to the questions screen and see if there are any questions. And everybody's quiet so far. So that means everybody's got a good handle on scale. Yay. If you don't, make sure you post up in the next few minutes, because I will end off the class if there are no questions. And when I do end off the class, I will send you out a booklet so you can read about everything we covered. And then just give me a few hours to be able to post this video online, and it will be in our archive center. If you've never been up to our archive to see past presentations, let me take you there now. So up on our website, www.cadsoft.com, if you scroll to the very bottom of the page, you will see events and training. If you click on that link at the very bottom of our homepage, that will take you up to our schedule of classes, where you could register for today's class or future classes, and that's all found down here. So this is where today's class is Understanding Scale. You could register for next week's class, or if you've missed a class and want to see it, click here for the webinar archive. That will take you to our archive where you can watch past presentations. So up in here, you will see all of the different classes, and you'll be able to look at all of those and read up on all of those. And right here is a past presentation of Understanding Scale. It will be updated later today with today's class, but if you want to see a past presentation of it, you can go up there and follow that link. It takes you to our YouTube page where you'll be able to watch that past presentation. So without any questions, we will end off today's class. I want to thank everyone for taking time out of your busy schedules to learn a little bit about scale. And if you do have any further questions, never hesitate to contact us. You can email support@cadsoft.com, and they'll be able to answer all of your questions. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks and goodbye.